April 14th, 2026. Well, we now have a naval blockade in the war with Iran, and that's kind of the latest development following a series of things over the past few days. Prior to that, of course, we had the negotiation with Vice President Vance in Islamabad against the delegation of Iranians, and that one ended up in a no deal, which I think was pretty predictable, actually. However, maybe that's a feel each out session. I mean, I think that the idea they'd make a deal in the first meeting is probably unlikely. But before we get into everything else, we had a few other topics. The Artemis 2 was successfully returned from their trip around the moon, which is really a good thing, particularly considering that this is our first trip beyond Earth orbit in a long time and very much overdue. And then we have also some other developments happening here. Swalwell is out as the governor's race in California, and of course he's now out of the House of Representatives as well. No sadness there on that. That's another long overdue development. And of course, related to the issue in the Russia-Ukraine war, in a way, is that Hungary has thrown out Orban as the prime minister in his party, and now we have a more pro-Ukraine prime minister coming in, and so we'll have to wait and see what that portends. But getting back to the main topic here, the naval blockade, which is now underway, we'll have to see exactly how that plays out. I see this as kind of in a way, a lower casualty way of achieving the same result we'd have had if we'd have seized Karg Island without all the casualties you'd have in such a amphibious operation, or whatever, or however else we would try to do that. So, but it achieves the same basic result. If the idea is to cut off the shipment of Iranian oil, and therefore to cut off the money they were getting, also not just Iranian oil, but anybody else that wants to pay tribute to Iran in order to get through the Strait of Hormuz is also being cut off. The risk of this is, of course, that may put us in a position of actually boarding and seizing a Chinese vessel. If the Chinese have a tanker under their own flag that were to try to go in there, and then we're going to enforce our blockade, that puts us into a direct conflict with the other major power in the world there, China, or one of the other two. And it puts us, well, I mean, China is not unable to, if they want to respond, because, of course, there's a lot of sea traffic going through the South China Sea, although probably very, very little of it has an American flag. I don't know. But the main thing, after all, the real objective here really is to cut off the shipments to China. I don't think, and also to cut off money going into Iran for the moment, which would, put pressure on the regime and enhance our negotiating stance without doing anything directly destructive. And the ceasefire theoretically could remain in place and still does at the moment, as of this recording anyhow. If it changes before you see it, well, that's the danger of these kind of videos. So that's kind of where we are on that one. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or you can also follow me on Rumble as I post there as well. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are here. It'll be interesting to see whether the Chinese actually do try to run the blockade or not. And there's some discussion among various parts. I heard the usual cabal on the podcasts suggesting that we couldn't go within 600 miles or something of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the other day, a couple of our naval vessels actually went through it. So I'm not sure that's at all true. But that is an interesting question. Would the Iranians actually decide to attack our ships during the blockade? If that happens, I think that we're back to the bombardment period, the thing that was avoided when the truce was started. And you can characterize that how you would like, but I think you'll find that is it could be a series of major attacks on the infrastructure of Iran. So but for the moment, maybe they will be deterred from attacking the vessels, even though they could. So, and then we're looking at, of course, how long would this have to take? I think that the issue there is I don't think that that's something that would necessarily yield any immediate results, in the sense that it's unclear that they're actually operating on a very large cash flow from this anyhow. But as I mentioned in a previous video, I tend to think that at some point China is going to be kind of fairly eager to get this thing over with so that oil can be flowing to their country. I mean, to some degree, they can try to rely on Russian oil. Of course, the Ukrainians are doing everything they can to disrupt anything like that. However, I still think that there's another issue that there's discussion that the Chinese will provide military equipment, perhaps anti-aircraft systems, to bolster Iranian defenses, and if the shooting starts, bring down some more aircraft, creating a situation like we had with the F-15 incident. But so that's kind of where we are on that. On the other hand, Trump has threatened a 50% tariff, as always, if they in fact do provide this equipment. So that's something else we'll just have to kind of keep following. But and we haven't. Those developments will occur in the days ahead. We'll just see which way they go on that. I'm not sure that the asymmetrical embargoes, because the way it was originally stated is nothing would go in there. In fact, I understand anything that pretty much isn't paying tolls to the Iranians, and the Iranians have a special pathway that ships that pay this toll go through, and of course that avoids any mines they might have laid. I don't know how many mines they've laid, but our two destroyers got in there without hitting a mine. So I don't know if there really are that many mines there or not. But that's, again, part of the ongoing situation. And we've been complaining a lot that NATO hasn't provided any actual naval support. Of course, Britain right now apparently is having a little bit of a run-in with the Russians are apparently messing around with some undersea cables and maybe pipelines. I don't think they've destroyed anything yet. There's some claim they may be trying to put a tap on one of them. Well, we've put taps on Russian cables before, so that isn't unheard of. I sort of think this was maybe a preparatory move. I mean, there's been a lot of, let's say, going after Russian oil shipments, such as somehow finding some pretext to seize their tanker and so forth. Now, in a recent development, I believe some tankers went through actually with a Russian naval vessel and escort. Of course, Russia can't really shoot their way through it, obviously, but that's another development along this line. That becomes another sort of a question. The other possibility we could get into would be putting defense teams on the tankers with man pads and machine guns, and basically preventing easy seizures. Then you could get into things like actually attacking them with various naval weapons. You could definitely sink and destroy the tanker, but if it's full of oil, that kind of creates an environmental mess too. And I don't know if any of the Russian tanker seized have ever been returned, so sacrificing one to create an environmental mess might be a plan that they might consider. So anyway, as we continue to watch the situation with Iran, at the moment we seem to have a ceasefire there, where I think the conflict in Lebanon that the Iranians are trying to bring in there is still ongoing. And meanwhile, the Houthis apparently are making threats to block out traffic through the Red Sea. And we'll have to figure out what can be done about that. That might be something our Saudi friends could deal with. They were fighting the Houthis before. Maybe they can get back into that game and start putting a little bit of damage on the Houthis if they try to do anything. Because after all, the Saudis have a oil pipeline that goes across country to a Red Sea port. And I know there was an attack on it. We've not yet heard a report whether the attack was successful or not, however. So we don't know whether it was really knocked out or whether it was just an attack that maybe happened. So now, but getting back to, I'll switch to the other front in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Apparently, the developments have occurred that there's been a fair amount of successful Iranian attacks on various Russian facilities, chemical plants, oil plants, and other military supporting entities. with their drones. Now the Russians have apparently introduced some new categories of drones themselves, which are faster and more capable than the early drones they were using. I guess up to a fifth generation drone, which looks more like a missile than a drone, and flies about, well, quite a bit faster. I think it's in what, 350 kilometers an hour, which is much faster than the original Iranian designed drones that they were using early on. And so, and apparently there's increasing use of things like AI, and they are trying to build their own satellite system analogous to Starlink in order to provide connection, because they've been blocked out of using Starlink over Ukrainian territory. So that's, on the other hand, they're not, I don't think they're really playing this for commercial purposes. I think this is basically for military purposes. But it will take them some time to put up enough satellites to create the effective coverage they need. In the meanwhile, they've been doing other things, like they put relay stations inside of Belarus to guide drone attacks as well. Now, an interesting development on the Hungary election is that now, presumably, Hungary will now vote to for the Europeans' 90 billion euro loan to the to support Ukraine's conflict. On the other hand, one of the pressure points that was used against Orban was the fact that the Ukrainians had cut off the oil shipments through their territory from Russia, and putting a lot of economic pressure on Hungary. Now, at the same time, of course, the international oil situation has gotten a lot worse than it was at that time because of what's going on with Iran. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because while Russia, I'm sure, would be fully willing to provide oil to Hungary if they don't vote for that package, then Ukraine wouldn't let it go through their territory. If Ukraine will let it go through their territory, will Russia supply? I mean, sure, they'd lose a little bit of money over it, but they're making top dollar on anything they can sell right now. So is it really worth it to them? They may want the political pressure. That's something that will have to be determined, let's say. But that's another interesting little fly in that ointment here, and let's see how that goes. Meanwhile, I guess the conflict is, well, I wouldn't say it's at a stalemate, but it's going a lot slower because apparently the drone dominance on the battlefield has gotten so intense that it's very hard to conduct any kind of offensive operation. And both sides are experiencing pretty bad results depending on which sector it was in. So that's happening too. So we'll just have to continue to wait and see how that goes. Meanwhile, this whole thing is not helping Trump out politically, I would say. Although I think things have maybe sort of stabilized. The Real Clear Average has his approval rating down at 15 points. And I think his approval rating isn't really helped any by his ongoing sort of rhetorical stance. I think he really needs to rethink public statements and how he makes them. But will Trump do that? Everybody's been telling him that for a long time. And, well, he's on his second term as president. So good luck with that one. So anyway, that's about it for this time. I'll be, as always, post this on YouTube and Rumble. And the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. So all for this time.